UFC London betting and DraftKings show. We have 15 fights this Saturday afternoon. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. We're going to get things started in the flyweight division with an exciting matchup between Rafael Filio against Daniel Beres. And this is actually not only my first bet of the week, I have a max play on this fight. I am betting Daniel Beres. I bet him at minus 102. The line actually moved against me, but I don't care. I don't think there's any reason why this guy should be anywhere near even money. And you probably recognize that name because I was big on Daniel Beres a couple seasons ago on Contender Series. He ended up losing a split decision against Carlos Hernandez. Really close fight, had Hernandez hurt multiple times, but ultimately lost a split decision there. But I've always been pretty high on this dude. He's now 34 years old, so he's a little bit older, but now seeing his dream come true, making it to the UFC, I think he's going to take full advantage. In terms of the matchup, I just think he's a better striker on the feet. I think he's much more explosive. This guy has a strong jab, some heavy leg kicks as well, and he's got great timing on his wrestling. He's capable of landing takedowns. We saw it in that Hernandez fight. We've seen it time and time again on the regional scene as well. 13 of his 16 wins have come inside the distance. I mentioned that explosive power. I just think he has more ways to win this fight, whereas Rafael Filio, I think, is getting overvalued because he kind of overperformed expectation in his UFC debut against Muhammad Mokaev. And I always mention that when it seems like somebody who the public was expecting to just get dog walked just kind of is a little bit more competitive than they're expected to be, and all of a sudden now we think this guy's good. I don't get it. I don't think Filio's very good at all, to be honest with you. I bet against him on Contender Series in his fight against Echeverria, and that dude was not very good at all. So Filio did his business there. But this dude, I think he's very vanilla. I mean, obviously he's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but his wrestling's no good. His striking, I don't think is very good either. He's got a little bit of power, but he's not really looking to do a whole lot. A little bit of leg kicking games like that. That fight against Mokaev, I think it spoke more to Mokaev just kind of soft cocking a little bit after that initial burst in the first round where he thought he was just going to roll right through him and then he didn't. And then you saw him kind of take round two off. Nothing really happened. Filio won round two in 2 of the 3 scorecards, but it was basically just because he was moving forward and he landed a few leg kicks. He's not going to be able to move forward and put Beres on the back feet. This is a guy in Daniel Beres who's known for his forward pressure in all of his fights. That's one thing that's very consistent with him is he's going to move forward. He's going to push Filio on the back foot, and I think he's going to have a ton of success with the boxing. He rips the body well. I think he's got clearly more finishing ability in this one. The one concern is that if he ends up on his back, he can give up minutes there, but guess what? So can Filio, and I think Beres is a better wrestler, so I think he's the one more likely to spend time in top position. I think this is a great fight to target on DraftKings. We're going with Beres. I'm planting my flag on him this week, and I think he comes through for us. Beres by submission is going to be the official pick, but I think it starts with him hurting Filio on the feet. Next up in the women's strawweight division, we have Bruna Brazil, a minus 155 favorite. The comeback on Shauna Bannon is plus 135, and this one opened up much more competitively. We've seen Bruna Brazil get steamed now to where she's at, and I think she probably is the rightful favorite now. I don't really have interest betting her just based on what we've seen from her in the past. And in terms of DraftKings, this is a 15 fight slate. There's just much better fights to target. I think in this fight, Bruna Brazil has basically all the upside. I don't think either of them are very good, but I do think Brazil's a more technical kickboxer. She's definitely, more clean on the feet, powerful leg kicks. She's not really a great grappler, but I think she's a better grappler than Bannon, to be honest. Bannon's a 5-0 prospect fighting out of Ireland. She's faced very low-level competition, and I honestly just don't think her skill set is all that great. So I think it's a very low-level fight. I lean Brazil as the more proven fighter, but both of these fighters have clear issues. Brazil, we just saw her knocked out against Denise Gomes in her UFC debut as a big favorite. She's actually been knocked out multiple times in her career. but I don't think that Bannon has the power to do it. So I think Brazil gets it done on the scorecards. We're going Brazil by decision as the official pick. Next up, we have Chris Duncan, a -145 favorite with Yanal Ashmaz on the comeback at +125. And this is a really good fight to target. We go from the previous fight that I don't really have any interest in to this fight where I have a ton of interest because I expect it to end inside the distance. I think you want exposure to both of these guys on DraftKings. I think both of them are capable of not only winning, but finishing the fight early. Both guys have knockout power. Both guys can potentially land takedowns as well. I slightly favor the defense and the durability of the underdog in Ashmaz here. And I know Duncan's a popular fighter. He's a popular pick this week as well. But I just don't trust the striking defense. And I don't really trust the durability either. You know, this is a guy who we've seen rocked time and time again in just about every one of his fights. And then his last fight against Omar Morales, where he got a win, it was a split decision. And honestly, I didn't think he looked great in that fight. I still don't trust the chin. And I think Ashmaz has some pretty decent counters. Duncan's hittable enough that maybe he can catch him with something. So I'm going with Ashmaz by knockout as the official pick. But again, I'm probably just going to hedge this one out on DraftKings with slightly more exposure to the underdog. Next up in the women's bantamweight division, we have Ketlen Vieira, a -150 favorite with Pani Kianz on the comeback at +130. And this is another fight that I think you can get away from on DraftKings. Again, it's a massive slate. We have so many fighters and different fights to target. You just don't have to be picking these fighters that are not only expected to go to a full decision, but just don't really have the highest ceiling either in terms of the matchup. You know, we'll start on the Vieira side. I think she's gotten a little bit of heat in the past because of her cardio, and rightfully so. It used to be a glaring issue, but we've seen time and time again now, even in 5-round fights where she's kind of shored up those cardio issues to the point where I favor her to win this fight despite Kianz having the output advantage on the feet, and Vieira is not the best striker, but we've seen her boxing improve over her last few fights as well, and I think she's going to have the grappling advantage. I think that's what puts her over the edge here. We're going Ketlen Vieira by decision as the official pick, but again, I'm looking to have little to no exposure to this fight on DraftKings. Next up, we have Makhmud Muradov, a -325 favorite with Brian Barberena on the comeback at +255. And I really favor the Muradov side in this matchup. He's coming off a loss against Kai Bohayo in his last fight, but we've seen his last few fights, he's really been matched up with primarily grapplers. So he's being forced to defend takedowns, to defensively grapple, and typically he just wants to strike. This is a very powerful striker. 17 of his 25 wins have come by knockout. I think it's going to pay pretty big dividends now that he's finally going up against a guy who's not going to be diving at his legs from the opening bell. And I think he takes full advantage here because Brian Barberena, yes, over the course of his career, he's been known to push a pace on the feet, be durable, go to war, but over time, you know, this guy's certainly on the back end of his career. He's been knocked out twice now. He's been finished multiple times as well. I don't trust him now, this version of him having multiple big surgeries, questioning the durability. I don't trust that version of Barberena to be able to stand and trade with Makhmud Muradov, a very powerful, explosive fighter, particularly in that first round. I can't envision Muradov not landing something big to test the chin of Barberena here. So I think Muradov gets it done early. I think it comes by knockout. In terms of DraftKings, he's 9,500, and I actually think this one's just going to come down to ownership, whether or not you want a big allocation to him. And the reason I say that is because 9,500, he's kind of sandwiched in between Tom Aspinall at 9,700 in the main event, and you just go a couple $100 cheaper to Andre Muniz. Both of these guys have better inside the distance lines. Both of these guys are probably more popular in terms of their fighter popularity. I just think those guys is going to be where the ownership kind of concentrates. And there's a chance that Muradov and Molly McCann, for obvious reasons, those two can get squeezed because they are so expensive. They don't have a strong history of scoring super high on DraftKings, and there's just better fighters around them. So I think, again, that's just going to come down to how ownership shakes out later in the week. But I think Muradov, assuming he comes in, in that lower range on this 15 fight slate, I think he's worth being overweight to the field, just because I do expect that early knockout to materialize. We're going Muradov by knockout in round 1. That's the official pick. Next up in the heavyweight division, we have Jamal Pogues, a -165 favorite with Mick Parkin on the comeback at +135. And this is kind of your typical sloppy heavyweight fight where I think it has a wide range of outcomes, not just how the fight plays out, but in terms of DraftKings scoring as well. I do think the most likely outcome is actually a Pogues decision. And the reason I say that is because I do favor Pogues stylistically in this matchup. He's got a strong jab for the heavyweight division. He moves well. He's got a wrestling base as well. We've seen him go to that in the past when he needs to, but he's really not a super aggressive finisher. We've seen time and time again where he's been up on the scorecards and he's just content to cruise and let the judges decide. And that's not necessarily a good thing for DraftKings scoring. On the Mick Parkin side, he's a 6-0 fighter, fighting in front of his home crowd. 5 of his 6 wins have come by knockout. But this dude has fought, the lowest level of low level on the regional scene. He did come through as a big underdog on that Contender Series fight, but it was kind of just bum versus bum, see who falls down first. The one thing I'll say positive about Parkin is when he gets in dominant position on the mat, he is a very aggressive finisher, very powerful as well. So he is going to swing heavies. If he lands on you, it might be night-night, but I just don't think the guy's very good. I could see him struggling at the UFC level and against a guy that's just a little bit more technically sound in Jamal Pogues. We're going Pogues by decision. That's the official pick. Probably not going to be a big target for me on DraftKings, although I do have some small interest in Parkin as an underdog. Next fight up in the lightweight division, we have Joel Alvarez, a -190 favorite with Mark Diakiese on the comeback at +160. And this is a fun matchup in terms of entertainment value, but also on DraftKings as well, because on one hand, we have Joel Alvarez, who's clearly a top-tier finishing threat. 16 of his 19 wins have come by submission. He is a very dangerous grappler when he gets the fight to the mat, and typically how he gets the fight to the mat is after being taken down. Anybody that's wanted to take Alvarez down has done so. He's coming off a brutal loss to Arman Tsarukyan, but for my money, Tsarukyan's one of the best fighters in the division, if not the very best. So I'm not going to fault him too much for that. Prior to that, he was on a nice little win streak, and we've seen his striking develop over his last few fights as well. He does have power on the feet, so it's not just the grappling that you have to worry about. On the flip side, Mark Diakiese, we've seen over his last few fights, he's really turned into a wrestler in most of his fights, and he's won a lot of fights that way now, and it's something that we like for DraftKings purposes because when he's able to land 6, 7, 8 takedowns, he's going to score great on DraftKings. I think he can land takedowns here, but I think it might be a mistake because not only is Alvarez going to want to fight on the mat, not only is he a much better submission grappler, we've seen Diakiese just stick his neck out there multiple times. He has 2 losses by submission, both by guillotine, now facing somebody that loves to pull guillotine, that has a very dangerous ground game. I don't like the way that this shapes up for Mark Diakiese here. And even on the feet, he's just so low volume. Even though he's probably the cleaner striker, I think Alvarez is probably going to be the one moving forward, doing more, making things happen. So I don't trust Diakiese in this spot. I think Alvarez does get it done by submission. It's a fun fight for DraftKings. I think you want exposure to both sides, but I'm definitely going with Alvarez by submission as the official pick. Next fight up in the welterweight division, we have Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts, who is now a small favorite at -120. The comeback on Johnny Parsons is +100, and this one flipped because Parsons was actually a small favorite earlier in the week. So people like Hot Chocolate Roberts here. I don't know why. I guess I understand it in theory because he's the more proven fighter, probably the more well-rounded of the two in terms of a skill set standpoint, but I just don't trust the durability, man. I don't trust really anything about him. The fight IQ's always been bad. The durability's always been bad. He's been knocked out 4 times in his career. I don't want to put my money anywhere near this dude. And then on the flip side, Parsons previously fought on Contender Series. He's been off for 2 years now. Since that win, he pulled off a big upset against Solomon Renfro on Contender Series. He won by split decision. He's been off for 2 years, apparently due to lingering concussion issues. And he's a guy who's also been knocked out a couple times in his career. So I don't really trust his durability either. Now, he is probably the more skilled striker of the two. He's the Muay Thai striking coach at Syndicate MMA. So he's certainly more of a kickboxer, wants to keep the fight on the feet. And I think that's where he's going to have his best path to victory here is to land one of those big bombs. He typically swings heavy, swings big early. I think that's his best chance here against Roberts, and I think he could get him out. So I lean Parsons by knockout, but it's one, I mean, it's so low level, issues on both sides, that I'm not going to talk anybody off of Danny Roberts here. I'm just personally going to have more exposure to the Johnny Parsons side. We're going Parsons by knockout as the official pick. And next up, we have Daniel Marcos, a minus 145 favorite, with Davey Grant on the comeback at plus 125. And this is another fun matchup and another Contender Series guy. You know, I thought about bringing my guy Don on the show this week, but he is just honestly just glued to the couch taping Contender Series prospects for this upcoming season, so he was unable to join us this week. But in terms of the matchup, Marcos is just a pretty fun fighter. He's 14-0, undefeated fighter, but a lot of those came against the regional competition over in Peru, so he hasn't really faced super high level. He did come through as an underdog in his UFC debut against Simon Oliveira. He ended up winning that fight by knockout, and this dude is very explosive on the feet. He rips the body well. He's going to try some flying knees and other unorthodox attacks, but he is quick. He does have power, and the guy's super durable as well. And the last thing I'll say about him is his takedown defense really checks out. We saw that in the Contender Series fight against Brandon Lewis. We saw it again in his UFC debut against Simon Oliveira, who ended up gassing himself out trying to take him down. And I think we see it here against Davey Grant, who's not the greatest wrestler. He does average around 1.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. I think he's going to have to struggle to get Marcos to the ground here. I'd be surprised if he did. And I just think over the course of 15 minutes here, the speed, the durability is really going to play into the favor of Daniel Marcos. Davey Grant turns 38 years old later this year. He's coming off a third-round submission victory over Rafael in a fight that he was down 2 rounds on the scorecard. So I think he's near the end of his career, getting older, don't really trust the durability anymore, and he's facing someone that's difficult to grapple and that's going to be explosive and fast on the feet. So I think this is going to be competitive, basically, until Grant ends up getting clipped and hurt and potentially even knocked out. I'm kind of 50-50 on whether or not it hits the judges' scorecards or maybe a late Marcos finish, but I do think ultimately Marcos gets his hand raised. We're going Marcos by decision as the official pick. And next fight up, we have LeRon Murphy, a minus 140 favorite, with Josh Calibo on the comeback at plus 120. And it's not just the female fights that I mentioned earlier that I don't have much interest in. It's this fight as well, because I do think it probably hits the judges' scorecards. I don't see a ton of upside really on either side. I slightly lean with LeRon Murphy. Technically, he's never lost a fight. He's been to a draw once or twice, but we've technically never seen him lose. But I do think he kind of fights on thin margins. Not that he's a bad fighter. He's very athletic, does have power. 7 of his 12 wins have come by knockout. He's a solid kickboxer, but we've seen he can give up the takedowns, and typically he does work back to his feet pretty quickly, but he can be taken down. And even though he's a decent wrestler offensively, he just doesn't do it enough. He averages less than 1 takedown per 15 minutes, and he's not really a high volume guy either. So unless you're knocking guys out, you're just going to struggle to separate yourself to win rounds. And then on the flip side, Josh Calibo's coming off that submission victory over Melsik Bagdasaryan, where he got basically dog walked in the first round and then just took advantage of a weird exchange where he ended up just wrapping up the neck and Melsik gave it to him immediately. But I do think Calibo is a pretty decent striker, does have some pop in his hands. We've seen him land a couple knockdowns at the UFC level, and he's got a bunch of knockouts to his record as well. So I think that's probably his path here, is just being the more dangerous guy in terms of knockout ability. You know, LeRon Murphy's more of a heavy leg kicker as opposed to a big punch guy like Josh Calibo is. So I think that's kind of going to be the dynamic here. I do think it probably hits the judges' scorecards. I'm ever so slightly leaning with Murphy. I think he wins 29-28, but we're going Murphy by decision as the official pick. I'm going to be underweight to both sides on DraftKings. And before we get to the main card, guys, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and drop a comment. Basically, anything that you do like that will help me out as far as growing this channel. And I do videos like this every single week. I put out a lot of content on Twitter at Jon Kelly DFS and on my website, fightnumbers.com. It's all completely free. All I ask is that you support me by hitting those buttons. Takes 2 seconds and it goes a long way. Thank you in advance, and let's get back to the fights. Next fight up, we have Fair ZM, a minus 155 favorite, with Jai the Black Country banger on the comeback at plus 135. And this is a matchup where I favor the Ziam side. I think this one's primarily going to play out on the feet, and I just think he's a cleaner striker than Jai Herbert. Herbert is a solid striker in his own right. Most of his wins have come by knockout. That's clearly his path to victory, but we've seen time and time again, he wants to go to these wars and swing with these guys. He doesn't have the chin to do it. He's lost by knockout in 3 of his 4 career losses, and that's really the main concern with Herbert and his defensive grappling, because he doesn't really know how to grapple either. Now, Fair Ziam, originally when he came to the UFC, didn't have much grappling chops, and I still wouldn't say he's a good grappler, but he's certainly come a long way. I think if either guy were to have any grappling success in this fight, it's got to be Fair Ziam. I favor him on the feet as well, and that's where I expect this fight to play out for the most part. We're going Ziam by decision. That's the official pick. The only reason I say decision and not knockout is because typically he's not really known as a huge knockout guy, and he's another guy that just doesn't really take too many chances. He's going to play solid defense, fight behind that jab, but he's not really going to overswing and overcommit to try to get the finish. So I lean decision. So we're going Ziam by decision as the official pick. And next up in the middleweight division, Paul Craig is dropping down to 185 pounds here to face Andre Muniz. Muniz is a current minus 215 favorite with Paul Bearju Craig on the comeback at plus 185. And this is a matchup where I think you have to expect these guys to hit the mat and see some exciting grappling exchanges, because that's clearly what both guys want to do. Muniz, one of the more dangerous grapplers in the division. 15 of his 23 wins have come by submission. And then on the flip side, Paul Craig is nearly just as dangerous. 13 of his 16 wins have come in that fashion by submission as well. So I think that's clearly where both guys want this fight to play out. I think it's only a matter of time until it does hit the mat. And I trust Muniz more in terms of being the better submission grappler, the more dangerous one. I think either guy could potentially wrap something up, but I trust Muniz to get the bounce back here, coming off that loss to my guy Brendan Allen. So shout out to him for coming through for everybody there. But I think Muniz bounces back here, gets the submission win. I have concerns about Paul Craig dropping down to 185 here, and I don't think it's a good idea. I think he gets submitted, and we're going Muniz by submission. 9,300 on DraftKings. He's one of the better fighters to target above that 9K price range. And next fight up, we have Nathaniel the Prospect Wood, a minus 195 favorite with Andre Fili on the comeback at plus 165. And this is another really good matchup. I think both of these guys are very solid, very well-rounded. I've always been kind of a Nathaniel Wood stan, and that's not going to change here, because I think in terms of the matchup, I like Andre Fili. He's been a staple in the division for the past decade or so. But in terms of this matchup, I just feel like at this stage in their career, Nathaniel Wood's just a better version of Andre Fili, because both of these guys are looking to fight similarly. Both of them have really solid jabs. Nathaniel Wood has a great jab, Fili a solid jab as well. Both of them are going to mix in the leg kicks. They like to sit down on those leg kicks, and both of them are capable grapplers as well. We've seen Fili average around 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. Wood's right around that 2 per 15 mark. So it's just one of those things where the metrics look similarly. I think the fighting style is similarly when you watch it play out. And I just think Wood's a better version of Fili. He's going to be throwing more output. I think he's slightly the better submission grappler as well. If we were to see some grappling exchanges here, I worry about the size a little bit. Fili is going to have multiple inch reach advantage, just kind of naturally be the bigger fighter in there. But Wood's tough, man. He's very strong, came through when a lot of people were doubting him as an underdog against Charles Jourdain, and he really looked like a big favorite in that matchup. I like Nathaniel Wood. I think he's a better version of Fili here, so I think he gets his hand raised. We're going Wood by decision as the official pick. Which brings us to our co-main event, as my girl Meatball Molly McCann is a minus 215 favorite with Stoliarenko on the comeback at plus 185. And this is a matchup where I think it's so easy to break down Stoliarenko's fights, because she is literally just armbar or bust in just about all of her fights. All but one of her wins have come by armbar submission, not just normal submission, but specifically by armbar. That is her specialty. She is very good. As soon as you take her down, she's already rolling, looking to set up that armbar. So you have to be careful, especially a fighter like Molly McCann, who's going to be feeding off the energy of her home crowd, fighting behind her. She's always been an action fighter that likes to feed off that energy. I could see her just getting excited and not minding her P's and Q's and getting caught in an armbar. We've seen her submitted before. We know she's not the best defensive grappler, but Other than that concern about the armbar submission, I think it's all Molly on the feet. She's a much better boxer. Stoliarenko's never had any sort of striking defense. I think Molly's going to land at will. She's going to land some big shots on the feet. She's shown she can land multiple takedowns as well. Again, I think that'll be a riskier game plan for her here. So I don't know if she wants to go for it, but at 9,300, I think her price tag is, that's very expensive. 93 or 9,400, whatever it is, she's very expensive. And if this fight goes a full 15 minutes and she's not wrestling, I don't think she's going to pay off that tag. So I'm not expecting her to be very popular, and for good reason. Stoliarenko is actually an underdog that's very cheap, that has a path to victory, that comes by early submission, that really wouldn't shock me all that much. So I don't mind getting overweight to the dog here, even though I expect my girl Meatball Molly to get her hand raised. We're going McCann by decision as the official pick. Which brings us to our main event, as Tom Aspinall is a minus 450 favorite with Marcin Tybura on the comeback at plus 340. And I really don't have a ton to talk about here. I don't have a hot take. I think Tom Aspinall absolutely hurts this man on the feet. Aspinall's coming off that fight last year, the main event against Curtis Blades, where he basically just blew his knee out immediately in that fight. So it was unfortunate there, but now he's getting a nice rebound spot, a cupcake matchup in front of his home crowd. And I know that's a little bit harsh on the Tybura side, but look at the way that Tybura wins. You know, he's an older heavyweight, has to get his grappling going, don't really trust the chin. He doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the striking. He's just going to be super outgunned on the feet. And in terms of other matchups where he was able to come through as an underdog because of his grappling and his gas tank, I don't think those are going to be advantages for him here against Tom Aspinall, who's a BJJ black belt. I think he could fend off the takedowns early, and I think he knocks out Tybura for a 5th time in his career. We're going Aspinall by knockout. That's the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have my DraftKings player rankings. It'll have my ownership projections as well. A couple other things. It's completely free. I'll pin it in the comments. And as always, I appreciate your support. Thanks for watching. Best of luck, and we will see you guys next time.